Story 1. My girlfriend Jenna and I decided to go on a late fall camping trip in the White Mountains of New Hampshire last year. We're both pretty outdoorsy and have done a lot of backpacking, but this was our first time in that area. We hiked in about 5 miles to a small secluded campsite next to a stream, surrounded by tall pines and birch trees. The ground was blanketed in crisp orange and red leaves that crunched under our boots. It was chilly but beautiful weather. We set up our tent, made a fire, cooked some chili for dinner, and opened a bottle of red wine as the sun began to set. It was a perfectly tranquil evening, until around midnight. Jenna and I were just getting settled into our sleeping bags when we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on the leaves. Slow, deliberate steps pacing around our campsite in a circle. We froze, listening intently. The steps came closer, circling around our tent. Then they stopped, right outside the tent door. A few eternal seconds passed. Then the footsteps started up again, pacing another slow lap around our site. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking. "Is someone there?" The footsteps paused briefly and then continued their steady pace. I unzipped the tent and shined my headlamp out into the woods, Jenna clutching my other arm. But I couldn't see anything. No animals, no other campers. The sounds had stopped the moment I opened the tent. "What the hell?" I muttered. We listened for another minute but heard nothing. Uneasily, we zipped the tent back up and tried to convince ourselves we just heard a deer or something. But a few minutes later, it started up again. Footsteps on the leaves doing laps around our tent. Closer this time. We could hear each individual leaf crunch and the occasional snap of a twig. I swear it sounded bipedal, like a person on two legs. But who would be circling our tent in the middle of the night like some creep? This time I jumped up and burst out of the tent, determined to catch whoever was messing with us. I stood there in my long johns, shining my light in every direction, breath fogging in the moonlight. But again I saw nothing out of the ordinary. The whole forest was still and silent, not a creature stirring. "This isn't funny," I shouted into the darkness, trying to sound intimidating. "We know you're out there. Show yourself." No reply but the hoot of a distant owl. Grumbling, I got back in the tent, zipped it tight, and we tried to go to sleep. Not 10 minutes later, the footsteps started again. We laid there rigid, pulse pounding in our ears, as the slow crunching of leaves marched round and round and round our campsite in the blackness. This happened all night. The footsteps would start up, circle us for 10 or 20 minutes. The moment one of us exited the tent to investigate, they would instantly stop, leaving no trace. We must have gotten up half a dozen times that night to try to catch a glimpse of who or what was out there, but we never saw a thing. Finally, around 4 a.m., the steps seemed to wander off, fading into the distance after one last lap. Exhausted, we managed a couple hours of uneasy sleep. In the light of day, it all felt surreal, like some shared nightmare. As we made coffee and oatmeal, we tried to rationally discuss what could have logically made those sounds. A bold raccoon or possum investigating our site? Another hiker messing with us? But the unnaturalness of the steps and the fact that we never caught the culprit unnerved us. Then as we ate breakfast, the footsteps started up again, in broad daylight. The same slow, deliberate crunching, pacing circles around our little clearing. Jenna and I stared at each other in disbelief. In a panic, we both leapt up and ran in opposite directions into the woods toward the source of the sound. But once again, we found nothing. The steps stopped the second we exited the tent, and there wasn't a single sign of an animal or person anywhere around our site. No tracks in the leaves, nothing. We were in a remote backcountry site and hadn't seen another soul since we left the trailhead. We broke camp and hiked out of there as quick as we could, jumping at every snapped twig and rustle of leaves. I glanced over my shoulder the whole 5 miles back to the car. We still go camping, but we haven't been back to that particular site. I've tried to explain away what we heard as some weird acoustical trick of the wind or a foraging animal, but I just can't shake the uncanny feeling that some unknown thing was circling our tent that night, watching us. Jenna doesn't like to talk about it. We both still have dreams about those footsteps sometimes. I posted about it on a couple hiking forums, but never got any solid explanations. A few people shared similar stories from that same area over the years. I'd be curious to hear if anyone else has experienced something like this out there in the woods. Part of me wants to go back to investigate, but a bigger part never wants to camp there again. I guess it'll just remain one of those unexplained moments for us. Story 2. I've been an avid hiker and camper my whole life, but there's one trip I'll never forget for all the wrong reasons. It was about 5 years ago when my buddy Steve and I decided to do a late fall backpacking trip in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Our plan was to hike in about 10 miles to this remote lake, spend a couple nights camping and fishing, and then hike back out. The hike in went smoothly and we reached the lake by late afternoon. It was a beautiful, lonely spot. No one else around for miles. We found a nice place to pitch the tent in a small clearing, about 30 yards from the shoreline. Steve got a fire going while I tried a few casts with my fishing pole, but no luck. With daylight fading, we cooked up some canned chili and took in the eerie silence of the forest, sipping some whiskey to keep warm. We turned in pretty early, ready to get an early start on fishing the next morning. I remember lying there in my sleeping bag staring at the tent ceiling when a strange sound caught my ear. At first I thought it was just the wind whistling through the pines, but as I listened closer, the sound clarified into what seemed almost like a voice coming from the direction of the lake. A raspy, gurgling moan, unlike anything I'd heard before. "You hear that?" I asked Steve. He was silent for a moment. "Yeah, what is that? An elk or something?" Steve replied, a note of unease in his voice. The moaning sound came again, louder, longer, almost agonized. Definitely not an elk, I thought. It sounded vaguely human, and yet, not. An involuntary shudder ran through me, and I felt suddenly very aware of how alone we were out there. We listened as the sound echoed across the lake a few more times. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The normal nighttime sounds of the forest reasserted themselves. "Probably just a weird bird or a dying animal or something," Steve said, trying to sound unconcerned. "Yeah, probably," I agreed, not at all convinced. It took me a long time to fall into an uneasy sleep. The next morning dawned cold and misty. Whatever had made that sound in the night, there was no sign of it in the pale light of day. Steve and I tried to shrug it off, more focused on catching some breakfast. We took the canoe out into the still, mirror-like surface of the lake to do some fishing. We were about 100 yards offshore when I saw it. A dark, vaguely human-shaped thing floating face down in the reeds near the shoreline. It looked bloated and unnaturally pale. "Steve!" I pointed with a shaking hand. He turned to look and did a double take, his eyes widening. "What the hell is that? A body?" We stared for a long moment, a coldness that had nothing to do with the chill morning air settling into my gut. Then the thing twitched. I swear to God it moved, convulsed in the water like a dying fish. Steve and I both yelled, nearly flipping the canoe in our frenzied paddle backwards. As we watched in horror, the pale figure slowly reared up out of the reeds, water pouring off of it. It rotated in its head in a jerky, unnatural motion, as if looking for something, looking for us. I'll never forget the face, human but not human, bulging eyes milky white, lips drawn back from a jaw that seemed unhinged, the waterlogged skin sloughing off in places, all framed in a tangle of dark hair. The thing let out a gurgling moan, and I suddenly recognized it as the same sound we'd heard in the night. It started sloshing toward us through the reeds with jerky, marionette-like movements. I've never paddled so hard in my life as Steve and I shot across that lake. Half convinced we were about to feel cold, clammy hands grabbed the canoe and tip us in at any second. We hit the shore at a run, threw our gear haphazardly into our packs, and booked it back up the trail without so much as a backwards glance. We hiked the 10 miles back out in record time, jumped in the truck and roared away in a cloud of gravel, pulse still pounding. We never spoke of it directly again, but we also never went back to that lake. I've heard other vague stories over the years about sightings of something strange in those woods, but nothing concrete. I'm not sure I believe in the supernatural, but I do believe there are things in this world we can't explain, and I have no desire to cross paths with that pale figure in the water again. Just thinking about it now, years later, I still get chills remembering the sound of that gurgling moan echoing across the misty lake. Story 3. This happened when I was 12 years old on a camping trip with my dad in the Talladega National Forest in Alabama. It was just the two of us, a father-son bonding trip before I started middle school. We hiked deep into the forest and set up camp in a small clearing near a creek. My dad taught me how to pitch the tent, build a fire, and cook over the flames. As the sun set, we roasted hot dogs and marshmallows, the embers flickering in the deepening twilight. Dad told me spooky ghost stories until I was both thrilled and terrified. The forest came alive at night with a symphony of crickets and owls. As our campfire burned down to glowing coals, we settled into our sleeping bags, tired from the day's adventures. I was just drifting off when a chilling sound cut through the darkness, a long, anguished moan that sent shivers down my spine. I sat bolt upright. "Dad, did you hear that?" He was already grabbing the flashlight. "I heard it. Probably just the wind through the trees. Go back to sleep." But a few minutes later, it came again, a woman's voice wailing in the distance like a lost soul. My dad quickly unzipped the tent and shone the beam out into the pitch-black woods. "Hello? Is someone out there? Are you okay?" he called. Another moan answered, echoing through the forest. It sounded closer now. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag to stand behind my dad, a big stick clutched in my trembling hands. "Stay close," he whispered. Cautiously, we followed the cries deeper into the trees. About 100 yards from our campsite, the flashlight caught a pale figure on the ground, half hidden in the undergrowth on a small hill. It was a woman lying face down, her dark hair obscuring her face, one arm outstretched towards us. She let out another chilling moan when the light hit her. "Oh my God," I gasped, tightening my grip on the stick. "Is she dead?" My dad called out to her. "Miss, are you all right? What happened?" Leaves rustled as she lifted her head slightly, long hair parting to reveal a young, dirt-smeared face. Her eyes glinted strangely in the flashlight's glow. "Whiskey," she slurred. "Too much. Boyfriend left me. Dropped the firewood." As we got closer, I could see an empty bottle near her outstretched hand. She was clearly very drunk. How she'd ended up alone out here in the middle of the night was a mystery. My dad knelt down. "Okay, miss, let's get you up. Were you camping nearby?" Together, we managed to get her to her unsteady feet. She pointed vaguely further into the woods. "Campsite, that way. Fought with my boyfriend. He drove off and left me here. Just wanted to give you the rest of my firewood." Tripped. Her words came out in a jumble. We walked her back to a small, disheveled campsite not far away. A dying fire smoldered in the ring, beer cans littering the ground. My dad got her some water and made her sit down. "Is there someone we can call for you? I don't think you should be alone out here in this state." She shook her head, eyes unfocused. No phone. Just want to sleep." She curled up in the leaves right there. After some coaxing and a whole lot of patience, we eventually got a phone number for her sister out of her and left a message. We made sure she was on her side in case she threw up, built her fire back up, and left a bottle of water and some aspirin for the morning. There wasn't much else we could do. We hiked back to our own camp in uneasy silence, listening for any more cries in the night. I couldn't shake the sound of those eerie, echoing moans, or the way her eyes had shone in the flashlight beam, glazed but almost predatory. I didn't sleep a wink that night, imagining her stumbling through the dark forest, moaning, or worse, imagining what might have happened if we hadn't found her. By first light, I begged my dad to pack up and hike out of those woods. I kept thinking I heard twigs snapping behind us the whole way back to the car. My dad reported it to the park rangers, but we never found out what became of her. That was the last time we ever went camping. Even now, over a decade later, when I'm in a deeply quiet forest, sometimes I think I can still hear that bone-chilling keening echoing through the trees. It never fails to raise the hairs on the back of my neck and quicken my step on the trail. You just never know what or who is out there in the wilderness, watching from the shadows. I know I was lucky to have my dad with me that night. Lucky we were able to help her. I shudder to think what might have happened otherwise. The forest can be a beautiful place, but it can also be deadly, especially when the sun goes down. I'll never forget the woman in the woods and how close I came to real danger, young as I was. It's not an experience I'm keen to repeat. Story 4. So this happened back when my wife Jenna and I had just started dating. We decided to go on a romantic fall camping trip together in the Allegheny National Forest. The leaves were all turning, the air was crisp, and we had the campground practically to ourselves. Perfect for snuggling up by the fire and getting to know each other better, if you know what I mean. We set up our tent in a secluded spot, cracked open a bottle of wine, and made dinner over the campfire as the sun went down. The stars were incredible out there away from the city lights. One thing led to another, and we ended up zipped together in a double sleeping bag, keeping each other warm. I'm not sure what time it was when I woke up to the sound of rustling outside the tent. At first I thought it was just the wind in the trees, but then I heard the distinct sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel near our car. Heavy, deliberate steps. That snapped me wide awake real fast. I untangled myself from Jenna and sat up, straining to hear over her soft breathing. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a weird snuffling sound, and what I swear was a low grunt, like something was out there smelling around our campsite. Now we were pretty far out in the boonies. It could have been a bear, or maybe even a cougar. All I knew was that there was no way I was letting any wild animal get near Jenna or our food. I slowly reached for my boots, trying not to make any sudden movements. "Babe, what's going on?" Jenna murmured sleepily. "Shh. I think there's something outside the tent. I'm gonna go check it out." "What? Like a bear?" "Maybe. Don't worry, I'll scare it off. You stay here." I started to unzip the tent flap, but Jenna grabbed my arm. "Wait. Take this, just in case." She pressed something small and cold into my hand. I looked down. It was a little Swiss Army pocket knife, the kind you get as a kid to whittle sticks. Better than nothing, I guess. I gave her a kiss. "Be right back. Don't come out, no matter what you hear." With that, I slipped out into the chilly night air in my thermal underwear, pocket knife at the ready. As soon as I stepped out of the tent, I heard the footsteps again, and they were booking it away from our sight, fast. I called out in my deepest, manliest voice, "Hey, get out of here!" The sound of snapping twigs and crunching leaves faded into the distance. I did a quick circuit of our little camp, pulse pounding in my ears. The car was undisturbed. Nothing seemed to be messed with or missing, and no sign of whatever had been skulking around. Just the endless dark woods in every direction. Satisfied that I'd scared it off, I headed back to the tent, already dreaming of curling back up with Jenna. I was just reaching for the zipper when I heard a metallic click that turned my blood to ice water. "Don't move," came Jenna's voice, low and deadly serious. I froze, hands raised. Slowly, I turned my head to look over my shoulder. Jenna was standing there in the tent door, arms out straight, aiming a black handgun right at my face with an unwavering grip. "It's me! Don't shoot!" I yelped, trying not to make any sudden moves. Her eyes went wide. "Shit! I thought you were..." She lowered the gun, visibly shaking. "I'm so sorry. I was sure it had come back." "Where the hell did you get a gun?" My heart was still tap dancing on my ribs. Jenna looked sheepish. I always carry it when I camp. For protection. I didn't want to freak you out on our first trip, so..." She shrugged apologetically, stashing the pistol back in her bag. I just stared at her. "So you sent me out there with a glorified toothpick while you had a loaded gun in here the whole time?" What else didn't I know about this girl? We didn't get much sleep the rest of that night. I kept imagining glowing eyes and sharp teeth in every shadow, and wondering what other surprises Jenna might be hiding. In the morning light, our little adventure seemed almost funny. Almost. We chalked the creature up to a raccoon and tried to laugh it off. But I gotta tell you, when we packed up to hike out of there, I triple-checked that the gun was unloaded and the safety was on, and that Jenna knew basic firearm safety before letting her carry it. We're married now, and that gun's still her constant camping companion, along with me, of course. But I'll never forget the night my new girlfriend almost accidentally shot me in the face because she gave me a pocket knife to go after a mysterious creature in the woods. Not exactly the romantic weekend I had in mind. Looking back, I'm still not sure which was scarier, the thing outside the tent or finding out your girl's packing heat without telling you. But hey, all's well that ends well, right? At least I know she's got my back and my front in the wilderness now. Just goes to show you never know what's lurking out there in the woods or in your girlfriend's sleeping bag. Stay safe around the campfire, folks, and always bring protection of all kinds. Story 5. So this happened when I was 16 on a camping trip with my summer camp in Pisgah National Forest. It was my first time sleeping in a hammock, and being the amateur outdoorsman I hadn't yet invested in a rain tarp. It was just me, my sleeping bag, and the stars above. There were 6 of us on this trip, all teenage boys full of bravado and not a lot of common sense. We hiked out to this remote site and set up camp as the sun was going down. I strung my hammock between 2 sturdy oaks, feeling pretty proud of myself. My buddy Chris decided to stash his backpack full of snacks right under my hammock for safekeeping. "Dude, you sure that's a good idea?" I asked, eyeing the telltale bulge of his candy stash. "What about bears?" Chris just laughed. "Bro, it's just a little chocolate. Bears don't care about that. It's not like it's a steak or something." Famous last words. We cooked dinner over the fire, swapped some ghost stories, and then crawled into our respective hammocks and tents for the night. I remember lying there swaying gently, gazing up at the Milky Way through the canopy, thinking how peaceful it was. The night sounds of the forest lulled me into a deep sleep, until around midnight, when I awoke to a rhythmic bumping against my back. Still muzzy with sleep, my first thought was that it was Chris rummaging around in his pack for a midnight snack. The bumping continued, more insistent. I started to drift off again, then something batted at my hammock from below, sending me swinging wildly. That jolted me awake real quick. I twisted around to peer blearily into the darkness, and found myself nose to snout with a black bear. It was a young one, maybe only a couple 100 pounds, but that was sure as hell big enough. It had one paw on Chris's pack, the other still raised from swatting my hammock. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, equally startled. Then I started screaming like a banshee. "Bear! Bear in the camp! Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit!" Chaos erupted as I thrashed in my hammock, trying to simultaneously get away from the bear and not fall out. The guys came boiling out of their tents in a frenzy, shouting and shining lights. The bear, obviously not expecting this reaction, backed up a pace. But he wasn't leaving without his prize. Quick as a blink, he snagged Chris's pack in his jaws and started hightailing it into the woods. "Hey, that's my bag!" Chris yelled, chasing after it in his underwear and hurling rocks. We all joined in the barrage, and the bear finally dropped the pack and fled, crashing away through the underbrush. We could hear it cracking branches and huffing in annoyance as it retreated. Chris ran up and grabbed his mangled backpack, frantically checking the contents. "Oh man, it ate all my Snickers." I was still untangling myself from my hammock, heart pounding like a jackhammer. "Forget the candy, are you insane? That thing could have eaten you." Our fearless leader, who I'm pretty sure had slept through the whole fiasco, came stumbling out, buttoning his pants. "What in the Sam Hill is going on out here?" After we all babbled out an explanation, he turned a gimlet eye on Chris. "Son, what have I told you about proper bear precautions and food storage?" Chris hung his head. "Not to leave anything smelly in packs or tents." "That's right. You just rang the dinner bell for every bear in a 5-mile radius. Congratulations, you've just volunteered for latrine duty for the rest of the trip." I thought that was getting off light, considering I'd nearly become a bear burrito thanks to his chocolate habit. We didn't get much more sleep that night. I laid awake flinching at every rustle, certain the bear was coming back for seconds. I've never been so happy to see daylight in my life. I'll tell you one thing. First thing I bought when we got back was a bear barrel and a rain tarp, and I never let anyone store their food under my hammock again. Chris's snack sacrifices weren't entirely in vain, though. We had a hell of a story to tell around the campfire after that. Even got a skit made about it at the end of Camp Talent Show. I played the hammock. But man, there's nothing quite like being nose to nose with a wild animal in the middle of the night to make you realize how thin the veil is between civilization and the raw force of nature. Camping in bear country is no joke, folks. Hang your food, stick to smellables, and for Pete's sake, don't bring anything a bear might want to share your sleeping bag for. Trust me, having your hammock hijacked by a hungry Bruin hell-bent on scoring some chocolate is not the kind of camping thrill you need in your life. I still camp out in Pisgah from time to time, But now I keep an air horn and bear spray handy, and I always triple check what my bunkmates bring in their packs. Better safe than yogurt, I always say. Happy trails and stay bear aware out there. Story 6, Gather Round Children, and let me tell you about the time my idiot friends and I almost became wolf chow in the Boundary Waters. It was supposed to be a guy's weekend in the wilderness. You know, fishing, camping, bonding with nature, and Jim Beam. Me and my college buddies Steve, Jack, and Steve's brother-in-law Steve, yeah, Drunk Steve we called him, had it all planned. Hike in, set up hammocks on this sweet little island, and kick back with some cold ones away from civilization. What could possibly go wrong, right? Cut to 11 p.m. on our first night after a few too many rounds of Never Have I Ever around the campfire. We're all 3 sheets to the wind, feeling invincible and in tune with our primal selves. The moon was full and bright overhead, the stars were out in force, and we were howling. You know how it is. A couple beers in, somebody starts imitating a wolf, then everyone joins in, trying to one-up each other. Pretty soon we're having a full-on howl-off, raising a god-awful racket that I'm sure carried for miles in the still night air. At the time, it seemed hilarious. Drunk Steve even started doing this weird yipping and dancing around the fire, claiming he was channeling his spirit animal. We laughed until we nearly puked. Finally, we ran out of steam and staggered off to our hammocks to sleep it off, still giggling like idiots. I'm not sure how much later it was when I woke up to the sound of a twig snapping, loud as a gunshot in the quiet woods. I lay there in my hammock, fuzzy-headed, trying to figure out what had yanked me out of my alcohol-induced coma. My bladder was screaming at me. Grumbling, I fumbled for my flashlight and started to struggle my way out of the tangle of my sleeping bag. That's when I saw them. Eyes, glowing yellow-green eyes in the darkness, just at the edge of the tree line. Several sets low to the ground, unblinking. My heart just about stopped. I froze, one hand on the hammock's edge, flashlight clenched in a white-knuckle grip. I didn't dare click it on. Very slowly, I eased back down into my sleeping bag cocoon, never taking my eyes off those eerie, glowing orbs. Wolves. Real, honest-to-God wolves, prowling around the edges of our campsite in the middle of the goddamn night. I heard a soft whine, then a snuffling sound as one of them nosed at our gear stacked under a tree. Another pushed its head into Steve's tent, and I could see the silhouette of its big, pointed ears through the fabric. It hit me then, with a sinking feeling in my gut. Our howling. We'd sounded the dinner gong for every apex predator in a 10-mile radius. Here they'd come, expecting to find a rival pack encroaching on their turf, and instead, they'd found a bunch of drunk, defenseless humans wrapped up like burritos. A hysterical giggle threatened to bubble up, and I clamped my jaw shut so hard my teeth ached. One thrashing hammock might be enough to set them off. I didn't want to see what a wolf attack looked like in person. I could hear Jack's muffled snores drifting over from his hammock. Drunk Steve was out cold in the tent. Nobody else seemed to have noticed our toothy visitors. I was on my own. I laid there barely breathing, eyes straining in the dark, for what felt like hours. The wolves circled and sniffed, occasionally pawing at a backpack or a cooler. My thumping heartbeat sounded like a bass drum in my ears. One bumped into my hammock and I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. But they didn't attack. Maybe we smelled too much like beer and not enough like prey. Or maybe they just weren't hungry enough to tangle with a bunch of unfamiliar two-legged creatures that might fight back. Whatever the reason, after what was probably only 20 minutes but felt like a lifetime, they melted back into the forest as silently as they'd come. I stayed frozen for a long time after they'd gone, unable to believe it. When the birds started their pre-dawn chorus and the sky turned gray, I finally relaxed, uncurling my cramped fingers from around the flashlight. When I told the guys what had happened over coffee that morning, they looked at me like I'd sprouted antlers. "Yeah, right, good one," Steve scoffed. "You probably dreamed it. No way a whole pack of wolves just rolled into camp and we didn't wake up." I wanted to believe him, but I kept seeing those eyes in my mind, and a little shiver went through me, despite the warm sunlight. I made a mental note that day. No more howling at the moon like dumbasses in the middle of wolf territory, and maybe pack some heavy-duty Depends next time, because I'm pretty sure I came close to soiling my hammock when I saw those silhouettes outside the tent. Nature is beautiful and all, but it's also scary as hell when it's 2 a.m. and there's nothing but a thin layer of ripstop nylon between you and a pack of curious predators. You better believe I'm sticking to car camping from now on, with a nice solid metal door to lock at night. And if I ever get the urge to drunkenly commune with my inner beast again, I'll do it at a karaoke bar, thanks. Werewolves of London, anyone?
Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video, also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.